Hello, welcome to Recovery Demystified, a show where we explore our relationship to substances from a radical, non-religious, and empowering lens. Our sobriety is not a purity contract. It is an invitation to become curious about ourselves and find our own unique paths to growth and healing. If you've been questioning the role of alcohol or drugs in your life and haven't found the resources that you need, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Hello. Welcome back to Recovery Demystified. My name's Early. I'm so happy to have y'all here today. Today, I've got another interview episode. It is my friend Cecil. We met working together on the ambulance back in the day. And funny enough, one of my favorite memories of Cecil is us getting in an argument at like fucking 4 a.m. or something. In order to catch a shift with Cecil, you had to work the night shift at the busy station, which is, not usually what people want to do, but it's what he always chose to do. So if I was picking up overtime or something, I would want to do it with a paramedic that I got along with. So I would try to pick up shifts with Cecil. And there was one time that we got in the argument after transporting a patient to the hospital who she really, really wanted to quit drinking. And she tried a bunch before and she was having a hard time. And in her apartment before we left on the way to the hospital, she was taking shots. And she was like, I know this is crazy, right? Like, I'm taking shots and I want to quit drinking. And she actually, the door was missing from her apartment. And she had a little gerbil that, Cecil had to catch and put in the cage before we took her there or something. It was really an interesting one. But yeah, me and Cecil got back to the station after that. And he was like, yeah, it's so crazy. Can you believe someone would be drinking before they, at the same time that they want to go get treatment? And I was like, that's not crazy to me. Having an addiction, you just drink at any juncture, And I was like, I drank every time I got out of the hospital, every time I got out of jail. It doesn't make you crazy or stupid. I don't remember what the exact term that he used was, but I was like, it doesn't make you crazy. It just means that you have an addiction. And as we got to work together longer, he would open up to me a little bit about the times that he had an addiction or mental health struggles or was inpatient or was homeless for a time. And it's just really interesting because, it's just at some point it's just your coworker, and then the intimacy of working together with someone on the ambulance allows this space to open up to be vulnerable with each other. And I did really enjoy working with him because there were a lot of paramedics that were burned out and lacked compassion, but it was cool to work with Cecil because he just always was compassionate, empathetic, and did great patient care. So yeah, super stoked to have been able to meet him through that experience. And his story is pretty intense. It also illustrates the importance of understanding what leads up to a person having an addiction, the childhood circumstances that people endure and how that affects their mental health and resiliency, and how ultimately escaping into substances is a very common coping skill for people who have had very dramatic and traumatic childhoods. And that being said, major content warning for this one, we get into pretty graphic descriptions of child abuse, domestic abuse, childhood sexual abuse, and his first suicide attempt. So if none of that is what you're ready to hear today, then please do take good care. And as always, if listening to this podcast is beneficial or helpful to you in any way, it would help me out if you would share it with a friend, if you would rate and review. And if you're able to, we've got a Patreon now and a donor box, and both of those have very low monthly options. The lowest one in the Patreon is $3 a month. So if you're able to contribute in any amount, that would make it so I can keep doing this work. And without further ado, here is Cecil, part 1. Hello, Cecil. How are you doing today?
I am doing well. I am wrapping up all of my schoolwork for this semester, so I am done. So that's exciting.
Heck yeah, I bet that's a huge relief.
Yeah, absolutely. And been spending time trying to reconnect with old friends that I've not seen since high school.
Hell yeah, we love to hear that. Will you start by introducing yourself to the audience? Let them know your pronouns and just a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Cecil. I am 32 years old, and I am I identify as he, him, and a little bit of background is I grew up in Arkansas my entire life. I joined the military at 18. These are some things that we can also revisit later down the road, but a very brief overview. Joined the Marines at 18, and then I've worked as a paramedic for the last roughly 10 years, and I'm now a counselor, mental health counselor in training.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll get right into all of that. We're here to talk about your story with addiction and recovery. So I'm curious what it was like for you to be a little kid, maybe some of your first exposures to alcohol or other substances, and then when things got bad for you, and ultimately how you decided to get into recovery. So start wherever you'd like.
Yeah, so I think it's important to start at the beginning because I found that definitely for myself and for many people that I've interacted with, that's really where a lot of kind of the stuff starts for people. And yeah, let's go back to the beginning. So I was born and raised in Stone County, Arkansas, which is about 3 hours east of here.
The kind of podunk?
Yeah. It's a small little place. They have like the Ozark Folk Center and some like just not a lot. There's not much there. And so my mom was a nurse and my dad was a mechanic by trade. I guess I should back up a little bit. Sorry, I do get distracted, but so yeah, my mom and dad, I have a brother that is 3 years older than me. And so my mom had actually previously married, and they had gotten a divorce, and I never actually knew him, obviously. And he left, and so my dad came into the picture, and then had myself and two other sisters. We're each 2 years apart, and so he basically was like the predominant kind of father figure for my brother as well. And I suppose this is important because, yeah, my dad was, unfortunately part of kind of the pain I guess I had growing up and kind of what I carried into adulthood. I guess start there. We grew up in a single-wide trailer kind of out in the middle of nowhere in Stone County, and there wasn't a lot of resources or anything to do, for us. I remember, I guess my earliest memories related to like financial security and things are like there'd be oftentimes like not a lot of food around. A lot of times you just didn't, have stuff to eat unless, your parents were there to make stuff, especially when we were younger.
Were they gone at work a lot?
Yeah, so like my mom was working as a nurse at a nursing facility quite often, and my dad was also working quite a bit. And then there was times where he was being laid off or whatever was going on that he would spend most of his time kind of drinking alcohol, specifically just like whatever he'd get his hands on kind of. And that was kind of like the norm is like a lot of these memories are very fuzzy for me, which I now know is probably just because of trauma and things related to them. And so I've kind of started I'm digging them up right now as we're talking about it, actually. And so, yeah, my mom was gone quite often. And so my brother actually was parentified. Me and my brother both really were parentified very early on. Like we had to kind of pick up those roles of trying to figure out how to make toast and how to, make food for ourselves and then our two younger sisters.
Do you remember what that felt like as a kid?
Yeah, it was just normal. Like, it just felt normal, and you don't really realize that it's a problem until later. I found that people are specifically children, are so resilient. They are so adaptive and able to survive. You can adapt and cope in ways to survive that are adaptive, and you don't realize they're maladaptive or inappropriate until you're, obviously much older and you can look back or you start to look around you and see like other families that aren't that way. But you can't really make sense of them, I found, until you're much older.
Yeah, and I've noticed that's definitely like a theme with people that have had trauma in their childhoods, like whatever they're going through. It seems like as a kid, they're like, it felt normal. I don't know. It's just what I was used to. And it's just, a testament to like that the child brain's resilience and like ability to just survive when our caregivers aren't doing their best.
Yeah. And, I look back and I truly do believe, and we can get into this later, but I do believe that my parents were doing their best based on what they knew at the time. And that really helped me later on. To get back to your question related to my upbringing, so like that's kind of like the norm. And so like a lot of times, like obviously 4 children living in a single wide trailer with 2 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms meant that there was a lot of, we were like sleeping on top of each other, like in that one room, like the 2 of us brothers and the 2 sisters, like we're all in one single room. And we didn't have bunk beds. So like sometimes we'd have to either sleep in the same bed, we'd have to sleep on the floor. Like it's hard to remember all of these facts because it's been so long ago and there's so much stuff kind of like clouding that time frame for me, that there was times where like, you'd either be on the floor, you'd be, in a bed if you had one, and eventually we ended up getting bunk beds, and that kind of remedied that. But like it was like a bunch of different phases during that time of like just unstable, like living, like food, sleeping, and sure we had a roof overhead, so there was that, we did. But there was like many times where it was like the temperature control, obviously, in a single wide trailer, with the floor falling out and all these other things, like the temperatures were always like wildly fluctuating. Like there was a lot of times where we'd have to crowd around the heater, like the gas heater that was in the hallway outside of our bedroom, which has a lot of fond memories with that, honestly, like because it's like you're really bonding with like your siblings in a way that, I'm gonna use the word normal. Like if you were like these middle class and above like families, like their kids aren't really huddling around a fire for warmth in the middle of winter or laying in the floor, during the summer because the little AC unit isn't keeping the trailer cool. So that's like the financial and living kind of conditions that we lived in. But to go back to my family, my father, he drank a lot, and you had to be very cautious around him. Like you had to walk on eggshells around him because you never knew who you were going to get. There were times where we'd rolling around on the floor and we were wrestling and playing and laughing, and it was so fun. And then the next moment, he starts hitting you, and he's screaming. And I remember specifically one of my earlier memories with him was, I don't even remember what it was about. That's what's interesting is I found is that people don't really care about the incident necessarily. It's about the feeling associated with them and how he made me feel. He grabbed me by my collar when I was sitting on the couch, and I can't remember what it was. It was something like, I don't even remember. Yeah, it doesn't matter. So like he picked me up by my collar and he basically said, I think I was crying. And he said he would give me something to cry about. And, he grabbed me by a collar and picked me up like some, shit you'd see in some kind of like villain picking up the hero, he's grabbing this tiny little kid here and, he's like threatening me. And of course, he was intoxicated. Like, I don't think I ever had any memories of him when he wasn't drinking. He drank a lot of like, when he was drinking beer, it seemed like he was okay, but when he was drinking liquor, he would like really binge it, and that's when things would really go off the rails. But like when he was drinking beer, like he would drink with my uncle who lived nearby. It was like my mom's brother, and they really fed off each other as far as like drinking. My uncle he's now in I'm going to call it forced recovery, but he's an alcoholic, and he drank alcohol like his entire life, and I think that really fed into my dad's kind of addiction and relationship with alcohol. which again,
they had a camaraderie over it.
Yeah, like they kind of just like fed on each other, really. Like they would just like, he would disappear and like leave us in the house, like when my mom was at work. So like my dad spent a lot of time like laid off because like this is small time nowhere. And there's not a lot of, as you can imagine, there's pretty limited slots for mechanic jobs and things. And I think I remember him specifically getting hurt, and that was kind of it for him.
Yeah, and also when you're drinking to that extent, it makes it harder to like keep a job and search for a job and be motivated to do things like that.
Yeah, it really lowered his inhibitions to kind of seek out work and like really advocate for like work for him, I think. And I think he just also was dealing with a lot of things that like he just never dealt with. And like I say dealing with, I don't think he was dealing with them. I think he was just coping and existing. And, you know, that obviously affected his relationship with his children. And I don't think that he realized that at the time. So there was a lot of violence. So like there was just so much. One incident that I remember, and this is another thing for him, is that he denies it, and I think there's a lot of shame wrapped up in it. But it's just silly stuff. Like one example, and there were so many examples, and I could go on and on about like the physical violence, but like this one specific incident sticks out to me to this day, and he denies it. You know, I don't think he wants to, admit it, because there is a lot of shame there. But like my sister, the oldest of the two, she basically was outside. We were all outside. Another theme, and I apologize, I am a bit scatterbrained when it comes to a lot of stuff, but there was a lot of times where we would be locked out of the house. Like they would literally, I know a lot of people are like, oh, like my parents made me go outside and do whatever, but like my family would literally, like my mom and my dad would literally close the door. They would lock us four outside, and we would remain out there all like the majority of like from sun up to sundown, basically. We would be out there for hours on end. And obviously as a kid, your also cell phones didn't exist. Watches weren't really common, obviously, for children. So like,
just like watching the sun in the sky.
Yeah, like you would just be out for hours on end, and like you were not allowed to come inside, and like they would scream at us if we tried knocking on the door. So like we were just locked outside, and there was a lot of fond memories there too, and I didn't realize that this wasn't normal until I was in adulthood either, which I'll touch back on later. But anyway, back on track. My sister was outside with us, and for some reason, me and my brother thought it would be so funny we had a dog. Her name was Lady. It was a little Walker coonhound, and we thought it'd be funny to wipe dog crap. Not literally, we weren't going to, but we thought it would be funny to like take some of the dog crap outside and put it on a stick and chase my sister around. Just silly, goofy stuff, like stuff that like older brothers do to pick on their little sisters in a non-violent way. And we weren't actually going to, like, we both established, like, we're not going to do that. That's gross. But like, it would be so funny to make her freak out. Well, unfortunately, it didn't really work out in our favor, because she freaked out and she was running from us, and we were trying to wipe this dog crap on her with this stick, and she ran into, it is pretty funny, and
it's so gross.
It is gross. It is gross. And she ran into the runner, like the dog was on a runner, and this ended up hurting her, which was not obviously our intention. We were like, oh no, like she got hurt. Like basically she literally hit it like a clothesline. She literally was clotheslined. It hit her forehead, and she might have been, maybe 4 years old, maybe. She couldn't have been very old. And it clotheslined her, knocked her down, and she started crying and screaming because she was so angry at us. And of course, my father was intoxicated, and, his anger was like, it just came out. And so he came out and like did the whole like, grab a switch, like go find a switch for yourselves and bring them back. And we were like, oh, this is going to be bad. And so I don't know what he grabbed, but I knew specifically, I was like, oh, well, like, I don't know. It was kind of sadistic thinking, but I was like, oh, like, I'm gonna, like, grab the biggest freaking stick I can grab, so that, one, in my mind, I was like, it didn't play out this way as a kid, obviously, like, this, like, clear, but part of me was like, I'm gonna grab this stick, this giant branch, the biggest one I can grab, because then he's really gonna have to hurt me, or he'll back down. He did neither. Actually, he did really hurt me, but he like was like, oh, wow, you want to be a smart ass. You just think that like I'm not going to, whip you for this. And so he went and got one of these like those like real thin green switches that like wrap around you. Like it was very like bendable. And so he basically went and got it himself. He cut it out and he just beat the shit out of me and my brother. Like just hit, like we were trying to like stay still, but like obviously it hurt so bad, like you're moving around, and he blamed us for like hitting in other places that weren't like our butt, because he ended up hitting my brother around his legs, and like my brother was bleeding everywhere, like through his clothes, and like he hit my brother's legs because like obviously we were like jumping around because like it hurt. So like he grabbed us by our wrist and like we just took the lashings, and like this was kind of like a breaking point for my brother. I think this really changed his view on my dad and just like living there. I think things got so bad for him that like he wanted to escape so bad. And so he went and eventually he ended up living, I really was really, really close to my brother because like I found strength in him because he was like 100 pounds. Like typically he was like a bigger boy than me, like by a lot, height and like strength, weight. And so like I found like strength in him. Like he was a shield for me. And that really hurt him so bad. I think this continuous type of abuse in that way like hurt him so bad that he had to get out. And so his dad kind of abandoned him and like went to Illinois. Anyway, the short of the long is he eventually moved. He basically moved back with his dad, who abandoned him. It was so bad.
Damn.
Like things were so bad that he went to the guy that abandoned him, like his own birth father.
He's like, well, I know it's pretty predictable what's going to happen here, so I'll take my chance and see what's going to happen there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was left alone to be the new shield. And I'm a small, fragile boy.
How old were you then?
God, that's a great question. This had to have been, again, my memory is so fuzzy. It had to have been like somewhere between second and maybe fourth grade. So like I had to have been whatever the age is for that.
8, 9, or 10, something like that?
Yeah, like this had to have been early 2000s. Anywhere from like 2000 and like 1 to 4. I can't really remember.
Yeah. I'm also wondering, we were talking before about how some things felt normal, and then you were speaking about how you had to walk on eggshells around your dad because he was unpredictable and violent, and then the beatings and your brother leaving. Did all of that also feel normal, or was there some other perspective or emotions going on there?
At the time, I can speak from now and from back then. Back then, it did feel normal. Like, it just felt like I was existing. Like, it just felt like I was, like, riding this, like, I was just in it. Like, there was no escape. And I think that's the thing is that I've never really talked to my brother about this explicitly. Like, we never sat down and really, like, hashed this out. But, like, for my brother, he had an escape. And, like, I did not, right? And so, like, I oftentimes would escape into my own mind, especially as I started to get older and that those parts of my brain started to kind of develop. Like, I would spend a lot of time, like, daydreaming, and I'd spend a lot of time really just digging into, like, my internal world because I knew it was safe in there, kind of. I spent a lot of time in my mind, like, trying to escape a lot of things because I knew that, like, a lot of it was inescapable, like, it was inevitable. It was an environment that, like, it was mine. This was my environment, and there was nothing that a little boy like me could do about it, I'm sure my sisters felt kind of the same way, and I felt like there was a lot that kind of fell on me for a little while. And There was some other key events that happened coming up later, specifically around 2004, 2005, and I can only pin these down because I know where I was living at the time. That's how I remember it. And so my dad and my mom, obviously, they ended up getting divorced when I was about 9 or 10. So my dad and my mom, me and my brother specifically, were old enough to actually witness like physical violence on my mom. And between the two of them, like my mom was no pushover. She was no bitch. She would fight back. But eventually it got to the point where my dad, like, we witnessed her, like, so like my mom, I don't remember if these are two separate incidents or the same, but like all of this is like one memory for me. And my mom got in my dad's truck one day, and they had gotten into an argument. And me and my brother, we were told basically to stay inside. And like me and my brother, my sisters were very young, and I don't think they really specifically remember these memories. But like my brother and I were looking out of the blinds, and my mom got into my dad's blue, it was like an old blue, like Ford or Chevy pickup truck, like really old, like classic looking truck. Maybe 50s or 60s. I don't know. It was an old truck. And she basically got tired of his shit, basically. And because, like, she was having to, like, carry the team. You know, she was, like, working day in, day out. And, like, really, she was a servant. My mom was a servant at heart. And I now know that that's one of the things that I kind of learned from her. Interesting fact, you know, we have mirror neurons that pick up on a lot of things like behaviors, like body language and actions of the people around us, our caregivers. And so my mom gets in this truck and she puts it in neutral and literally just like lets it roll down the hill while she's sitting in it and crashes into a tree below like our house. Like it's a pretty steep hill, no brakes, just slams into this tree. Totals the truck. And like me and my brother obviously witnessed this whole event. Like we actually exited the house, and so we were witnessing this. My dad's chasing the truck, and it's like a whole thing. I think he was hanging on to the truck at one point, and he rolled off of it, and like that obviously escalated into a thing. And then we got scared because we thought they were going to see us, and so like we are peeking around the side of the trailer, witnessing them screaming and yelling and pushing and shoving each other. My mom, I think, had some kind of a pipe or something and was swinging it at my dad. And he, like, obviously is much stronger than her and, like, overpowers her and, like, gets it out of her hands and, like, throws it down. He didn't actually hit her with this pipe. He had restraint. Like, my dad is not a bad person, and I still stand by that. I think this was just the product of his upbringing and the pain that he was dealing with. And anyway, they make it back to the porch. And ultimately they get into another shoving match, and he shoves her off of this porch of this trailer. And like, for reference for people that don't know, like trailers are on wheels most of the time, like with like an undercarriage type situation. So like these trailers are technically like off the ground by like a good probably 5 feet. Well, he shoves her off this thing over the railing. Like he pushes her so hard, which like her mid back is like on this railing. He pushes her so hard on this railing that it actually breaks her back in several places.
Wow.
Yeah, and like, well, she comes over the railing and falls like basically on her face. And like, I don't remember if she actually ever got like medical treatment for this. She did much later, and like she ended up having like a lot of like herniated discs, slip discs, broken vertebrae. Like it really, really destroyed her back. And also she works at a nursing home, and anyone who knows anything about nursing homes, they're notoriously understaffed and require you to lift a lot. Sometimes even by yourself with gait belts. And so like my mom this just shows the strength of my mom. She continued to go to work despite having a broken back. She continued to work with a broken back, wearing a brace to provide for us. So even though, and I mentioned, food insecurities and like, and I didn't mention clothing. We relied on like the Dorcas House, which is like a thrift store that you had to like kind of like be there. It was only open on the weekends. You had to be there at like certain times, much like Salvation Army. Like you had to be there at certain times to get clothes. And so like we never had real like new clothes. It was always like hand-me-downs or whatever you want to call them. Like they were always secondhand, which there's nothing wrong with that. Now, as I had a strong aversion as that as a young adult, but like there's nothing wrong with that, but that highlights like how insecure like our clothing situation was, because there might not have been actual clothing that would fit us at that age and of our particular body sizes. And so there was times where like some kids would get clothes and some wouldn't. So my mom she was carrying the team, right? And so like obviously you can imagine how difficult this was for my mother to endure this. And I speak about my parents because I think it's important as for people that do end up having, you know, relationships with substances, because there ends up being a type of pain that comes from this that you kind of inherit to some degree from your parents or the people that are close to you, because you take on this pain whether you like it or not. Like you have your brain takes this on. And so I go back to my mother now because it was just stuff like this that was occurring continuously. And my mother didn't have an outlet. As you can imagine, people don't really talk about their mental well-being and their stressors and the pain that they're dealing with.
Especially not like the generation of our parents or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
It's very, very taboo to like admit that you had a mental health problem, or that like, oh, you only see a therapist if something's wrong with you.
Yeah, like you're a cuckoo. Yeah, you're cuckoo. And that's carried on from generations. I mean, generations. And we're just now seeing small. I want to say huge, but in the reality is these changes are, this is what they mean by generational trauma, so to speak. You're trying to undo, I mean, hundreds and hundreds of years of this shit. And I think now, I said I spent a lot of time in my head. I was a very spastic, kind of like goofy kid, and I had this strong need to want to be liked and to want to be cared for. And I think a lot of it was because I felt like there was so much doom and gloom and pain in our environment that we grew up in, and I was so hyper aware of these things.
Yeah, and if you're not getting your like emotional needs met at home, you're going to really, really try to get them met other places.
Yeah, absolutely. And I now know that I kind of fall in that ADHD category. Which can be problematic, but it can also be a superpower. That's another thing we can go back to later that I'd love to talk about. But in the moment, I think this is kind of where this gets fostered, like where it comes from. I was very hyper aware of like the things around me and like the people around me and like the emotions that are going on. And recently, I discovered one of my earliest childhood memories was when I was about maybe 4 or 5 years old. My mom would confide in me alone, because it seemed like, I guess she must have known that I was like a very empathetic child from a very early age, or I don't know. But everyone always used to call me her favorite. I was the favorite child, which I don't think that is necessarily how I was viewed. I think it was the empathy. I think I was just really in touch with like the empathy, the empathetic understanding of like what my mom was kind of going through, at least like the pain wise. And so she would like really confide into me into some like pretty
things that are not appropriate to confide in your children about.
Yeah, like really just dumping things on me. But she would do it in a way that she would do it in a way that would disguise it. So like, and I don't mean this in a bad way by any means. This is a way for her to meet her needs. And it could have, we could always argue, your mom could have done this better, but like, this is the best way she knew how. And like, she would ask me to like take little Hot Wheels cars and drive them over her like legs and her back, because like she said that it was like good for her back, because like obviously she had, been her back hurt from work and obviously the things that had happened to her. I would like drive my little Hot Wheels cars over her and just listen. I wouldn't really say anything. I don't really remember saying anything, but I would listen and say, and just like be there and like attend to her. And listen to like all of her grievances, and this trend continued for a while. And I also she would also ask me to like take like lotion and like rub it on her like legs and like her feet, massage her feet, because I was very willing to do that as a child. Like I felt like I was also like meeting my needs of like being nurtured and like being close to my family that was never close to me in that way. Like I felt, and this is important I think later, because I think attachment theory and that attachment is very important to addictions and relationships with substances and our relationships with others. And like I think this is important because like I would do this habitually like for my mom. And so flash forward, we're doing this kind of like these are the times I'm able to get close to like my mom, and I never was able to get close like this to my dad because like he would never play like video. Like Nintendo was a hot thing obviously when I was a kid, and like he just would not really play with us. There were times like where he would be in a really good mood, and sometimes he would play like NASCAR games or something with us like on PlayStation, but like very rarely would we ever get that type of connection with like my dad. And so like I would meet those needs like through my mom. And eventually that caused a lot of, I think, discourse between my mom and my dad and some other things. And so when they got divorced, that weighed heavy on me. I really thought it was my fault for many, many years. Like I thought I was the cause of their demise.
Yeah, there's this interesting thing that I've heard about the child developing brain, that when we can't make sense of why we're not receiving adequate care from our caregivers, or if something like very traumatic happens, it's easier for the child brain to label itself as defective than it is to label the caregivers as defective. Because if the caregivers are defective, it makes us helpless. And if we're defective, it gives us some control, because then we can try to fix ourselves.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, just think about like that's a huge choice for a child to have to make, a very fateful choice that you have to make as like, but it's like done subconsciously. Like you don't do this.
Yeah, I don't think we choose it. I just think it's like a coping mechanism that the brain comes up with to try to survive.
Yeah, it's the lesser evil, because if you look at them the other way, how are you going to survive?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my caregivers are inadequate. Oh, then death must be imminent. So the brain finds a different way to have a perspective on it. So I'm curious, as you're growing up, what your first encounter? I mean, obviously you saw your dad drinking. When was the first time that you thought about dabbling in substances?
My first real interaction with alcohol, like for myself, was when I was probably about 14 years old. I think the first thing I ever drank was either Coors Light or like Rich and Rare, like bottom shelf, like plastic bottle whiskey. But I had a cousin that was much older that
Rich and Rare?
Oh yeah.
I've not heard of that one.
Oh yeah, it's definitely some bottom shelf stuff. It's disgusting, but
they come up with the craziest names for the cheapest liquor. Rich and Rare, Heaven Hill.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's actually right on par with that. And so
gross.
We had an older cousin. It's my mom's sister's oldest son, and he was a bit older than us, and so I think he was probably about 21 at that time, so he's a bit older than me. He might have been a little older, but my cousins invited me over, and I think they were like watching UFC or something, and like they like offered it to me, and I just didn't have, I think there was a mixture of things. Like when it came up for me, like I initially said no, because there was a lot of strong religious ideologies in the house, and I there's a lot there too to unpack that kind of really interfered with like my ability to be, I guess, myself in a way. But anyway, that came up, and I initially was like, no, because I was like, oh, like at the time I was like, oh no, I don't know. There was some conflicting feelings in there, I think, around obviously like how I've viewed alcohol, how I've seen alcohol, and then how there was a lot of like, again, like religious ideology kind of interfering with that. There's a lot of interference.
At 14, I'm sure you understood, or did you understand, alcohol is the stuff that made my dad mad? Actually,
no. I did. I just, I didn't really have any thoughts about my dad in the interaction with the alcohol itself, there was more of like this like two pools for me. I think it was more or less my dad's use of alcohol. It was more of like my dad and his association. Like my dad drank alcohol, but like it was more like my dad, I don't want to be like my dad. And not just because he's using alcohol, but I was like, ooh, I don't know what's going to happen from this. Like if I drink this, if I use this. And then obviously there's a religious part. And on the other side, there was this really strong want to be liked, to be included. And that part of me caved. And I drank all of the liquor. And I also know now that I drank a lot of liquor at that night, and I blacked out, and it was like a whole thing. But I remember when I was drinking it, I felt free. I felt so like loosey-goosey and just like, oh, this is so fun. Especially in the beginning, like the first few shots that I'd had. I was like, oh, this is so like, warm and fun. And like, I remember not having to feel the cold outside when I had to use the bathroom or whatever it was. And it just felt like everything was so fun, and like the room was spinning real bad, and then there was blackout, right? And
you blacked out the first time you drank?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But that was like my first introduction into alcohol. And so I never actively sought out alcohol. It was the social situations that I was attracted to. And so like it was always around my cousins. Yeah, that was my first kind of situation like around alcohol.
Yeah, it's a very common theme that we also hear a lot from folks on this podcast. It's like, I so desperately want that social approval that I'll do anything to get it, including drugs and alcohol. So that's my experience personally, and it's also super common. So that makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
Where did things go from there? You said you didn't seek out alcohol, but you just drank it socially?
Yeah, so it was more like the social situations it was tied to. So there was, this is when things started to get interesting for me. And I guess I should back up a little bit. There was some other situations around my dad and some things before he finally like left. So he basically, same kind of patterns repeated, DUIs and angry outbursts and all these other things. Well, there was a time where towards the end of his time in my childhood, before he eventually like straight up left, he got really intoxicated and basically slapped this guy in the face. I'm really abridging this story. My brother was gone at the time. I think he was living with his dad at the time. And my mom I can't remember if she was at the house or not. I don't think she was. I think she was at work or something. But my dad basically had called my mom and said he was like, where's my gun? And he was looking for a gun that I guess he stored at my mom's house for some reason. I don't really know why there was a gun at the house. I think it was a gun that somehow my mom had ownership of, but it was technically his. Anyway, he got really intoxicated, and actually, I misspoke. He didn't slap that guy. This guy slapped my dad because he was being a jackass to my stepmom at the time. There was a stepmom involved at the time. And so he was just being a jerk, and basically they got super drunk, and he slapped my dad, and my dad was embarrassed and infuriated, and he basically came over and kicked the door in at my mom's house. Well, we knew he was coming beforehand. My mom had warned us, and so I was tasked, since I was the oldest in the house, I actually went and got the gun, at least the ammo and the magazine. No, that's what it was. I took the ammo and the magazine of the gun out and I put it back, but I got rid of the gun. I put the gun underneath a car and buried it underneath a lot of leaves underneath a car, and that was a pretty surreal moment that stuck with me for a long time because I don't really know what was going to happen.
Yeah, that's super scary. Like,
yeah,
Dad's coming over here drunk trying to get a gun because he's mad, and you're responsible for preventing that as a child.
Yeah,
that's super scary.
Yeah, he kicks the door in, like, straight up. I mean, we're in another double wide, so I mean, this is like a stupid, like, flimsy door, so he just kicks this door in. And he, like, pushes me out of the way, and he's like, where's my gun? And, like, I just didn't, I played stupid. I was very good at lying as a kid. I think that was the other thing about being, like, very empathetic was, like, you get really good at, like, masking and, like, I don't know. I don't know if it might have just been a me thing, but like I was really good at like faking emotions.
Sounds like you had to learn how to do it for your survival.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like I was really good at it. And like he basically accused me of lying, but he couldn't prove it. And he obviously got pissed. He didn't hit us or anything. Like we weren't mad at us. Like we weren't involved. He just kind of like, he didn't like, when I say he pushed me out of the way, he kind of just moved me out of the way. But like, so these types of things have happened. And there was a lot of weight that I was carrying around, a lot of blame and a lot of kind of stuff. I'm just going to call it stuff. It was just a lot of emotions and feelings and kind of materials that I dealt with. So I started seeking out these events that were, I wanted to get, more events around like alcohol, and more so like I started seeking out more of these events, like being social with my cousins. And, they, obviously they would tell me like, no, like we're not doing that. Like we're not, we don't have these things available. And so around that 14-year-old, somewhere between like 10 and 14, I'd like to also highlight, I guess, a bit of a content warning. My cousin that I was socializing with, that was like a year younger than me, but he was bigger than me in stature-wise. There was a lot of like sexual abuse with him and me, and it was a very problematic relationship. I think it initially started out that like part of me like allowed it to happen, to meet kind of like needs for myself, to be close to anyone or anything like at all. For some reason, I just didn't feel like I could be that way with, I don't know, like my siblings. Like I couldn't be close to them. My brother was gone. He was very distant from me. There was a lot of guilt and shame that came up from this type of kind of stuff that would come up. Like I would go over to like my cousin's, like my aunt's house, and like eventually it got to the point where like I knew what was happening was not what I wanted, and it was wrong, and like this was hard. Like I didn't know what to do with this. I felt so it's hard to talk about even now. I've worked through a lot of this, like, and I've accepted a lot of this stuff, and like I can work through it, but like I can feel it in my chest now as I talk about it. But it's like it is like searing hot material. But like I think it's important to talk about this because it goes untalked about, especially with men. Like we don't talk about this type of abuse that happens. And I don't know if he was necessarily doing it. I don't know. And I don't care to ask, like, because he still is very much involved in like our family, and like no one knows this in our family. Like I've never told anyone this. This is stuff that I've only told like my very close people, but I think it's important to talk about in this platform.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that trauma stuff, especially stuff that is like sexual in nature, and when we were kids, it's like, I don't know, society teaches us just to fucking bury it completely and move on, and you're an adult now and pretend it didn't happen or something like that. And I hate that because it gives us this deep wounding, and it doesn't go away just because you're older, and it doesn't, you know what I mean? It just the only way for us to like heal as people and community and society is to talk about the fact that these things happen, talk about how it made us feel, and try to heal together from it. So thank you for sharing that part about your story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's important, and I'll be honest, that's been one of the biggest parts of healing for me, is just talking about it. Like, I think people would be so surprised. Obviously with people that you trust, like people that you're actually close to, like not just as some random strangers on the street, but like, I think it's so like counterintuitive. Like you have this fear of talking about it, like it's going to hurt you, but I'll be honest, like it's desensitized me to it, and not like in like like it doesn't bother me anymore. Obviously it still bothers me. Like I can feel it, but like it's gotten me so comfortable of like, I can get close to that open flame. Like I can get close to it. I can start to kind of put it out and like become more powerful than it is. Anyway, getting back to that story, so this was like an on and off thing. Like, it was not super consistent, but there would be times, like, because I was forced to sleep in the same bed with him, and so like he would just kind of like frame it in a way that wasn't like, it wasn't aggressive. Like, I think people also have a weird, like, they think that like sexual assault or like this type of stuff is like this aggressive, like violent a thing, and it most certainly can be. But I think more often than not, it's insidious and it's slow and it is methodical in how people do this and how they like force this stuff on you, as it doesn't have to always be like this, what we see on TV. Like, it can happen in marital, like, relationships with people. Anyway, so this stuff goes on, and eventually I say no. And I find out that no, everything was cool. Like, I think he was just kind of taking advantage of that weak meekness, that softness of me.
So he stopped when you said no?
Yeah, he would keep pressing. So, like, he kept pressing, but, like, I stood on business, and I just was like, no, man, I'm just tired. Like, I'm good. And I would just roll over and pretend I was asleep. And obviously he would still do whatever he was going to do to himself, but, like, I wasn't involved. But we were still in the same bed, so obviously there was still some material going on at the time.
Yeah.
But, like, he didn't press me. And I found that, I stood up for myself in some way, but...
How did it feel to stand up for yourself?
I didn't know how to feel.
Yeah.
I had no idea. Again, it was one of those things, like, I turtled. Mm-hmm. Like, I just, like, withdrew so much inside of myself that it was actually standing up for myself. So it was I learned a valuable lesson to, like, not stick myself out there. I still hang out with him, during this time in my teens, and
Is he one of the ones that you're drinking with?
Oh yeah. So his older brother is the one furnishing the alcohol. So, like, there's a complicated kind of relationship there, and we kind of just, like, act like it never happened. And so we're drinking and doing these things, and then we move kind of when things got kind of dark for me. I basically never had any, like, relationships, romantic relationships. I never tried to date. I never, even when I was a teenager, like, I know people are always like, oh, your people are girl crazy or boy crazy. I was nothing crazy, but I did have a problematic relationship with, obviously, sex because of this, and I found pornography at like 4 years old. That same cousin who was furnishing alcohol thought it would be really funny, which I found out later was actually a form of sexual assault. I didn't know this, but, like, I was working with a therapist, and it may not necessarily be assault in a way like we would recognize it traditionally, but they would, like, show me this material, this pornographic material, and, like, get a, like, laugh out of my reaction to it, because I was like 4 or 5 years old and didn't know what to make of it. And that's where a relationship with that I'd call substance as well. Yeah. Comes into place. And it came out, like, when I was 15, I was having a lot of problems around my own sexuality and, like, what to make of it. And I was so hurt, so confused, obviously. And then my dad left at like 11 years old, like 10 or 11, and never came back, like, until very recently did he enter my life again. But, like, he left, my brother was gone, this cousin was doing this stuff, we stopped doing this stuff, I'm drinking alcohol, obviously that's a depressant, and that's really, like, messing with my brain, and, like, obviously a lot of this complicated, like, love and, like, belonging stuff was so messed up that, like, at 15 years old I decided that I wanted to take my own life by suicide with a weapon. And so we had weapons always around. We always had guns around. And so I guess to kind of keep this brief, because there's not really much to it other than, like, I just felt like there was no point in living anymore, because, like, I felt so overwhelmed by these big feelings that I didn't know what to do. And so, like, I loaded up this gun, and I just didn't really think about much of anything at all. Like, I just was like, I want to be free of this overwhelming stuff. And I pulled the trigger, and it didn't go off. It just clicked. It was an older, like, SKS rifle with some older kind of, like, shitty magazine, like, ammo. And I am so grateful that didn't happen.
Damn. What did you think at the time?
I was stunned. I was confused. I just heard a ting, and that I just sat. But when I did that, I should frame my house was very small, and my mom was like not even a door. She was literally in the kitchen. I didn't know this, and she remembers this. She actually brought it up to me years later, because this was not the first time that I was going to try to end my life, but like this was the first big and real, and this was like the last close or like legitimate, thing. And so she heard the ting, like the noise, and then I basically was gonna try again, but to do that I like opened. I don't know if I was gonna try again. I don't know what I was doing. I was so shocked and confused that like I basically like pulled the little magazine thing out and it dumped all the ammo everywhere, and my mom heard this commotion, like this noise, because like the house is like dead silent typically. Like there wasn't a lot going on. Like everyone, just all of our family members like would like hide. Like my sisters were like hidden away in their rooms. Like that was just the norm. We all hid. And so like my mom heard this and she came in, and I don't think she knew what to do with that information, but I think I know she knows. She told me later down the road, like she knew what I had done, and she just was like, she just didn't know really what to say. She just was like, she just kind of comforted me, and I don't even remember what she said. That little section of time, that brief window of time, I don't remember anything. My brain was in such a state of just like shock, and I didn't know what to do with that information. Needless to say, I basically just did what I normally did, and I shoved it all back down. I was like, okay, this is a big feeling. I know how to get rid of it. I'm stronger than it. I'm going to shove it down. And so I like did the old squish cat and like just smashed these feelings down as much as I could and compacted them and put them away. And I continued being I had good stable friends, but we never talked about this stuff. I should clarify, I had a very good friend group, and I'm friends with them to this day. And I'm reconnecting with them more now.
Was there a drinking relationship with those friends or just with the cousins?
Just the cousins. Yeah. Yeah. My friends actually, sure, they played around with substances, marijuana and some alcohol, but like, I don't think they ever had a problematic relationship like it I did with it. Like I was actively wanting it as time went on because it made me feel so free. And so I could just forget about those feelings for a little bit. But this came at a price later on in my early adulthood. I met my high school sweetheart, 17 years old, and I was just infatuated with this person. I couldn't believe someone actually wanted me. Like, this was so interesting for me. Like, this person, like, I was infatuated with this person. I was like, I did everything for them. And so, like, the relationship was great until I joined the military.
What age did you join the military?
I joined at 18 years old. Actually, technically, I signed the papers at 17. That was a really hard thing for my mom. My mom, she tried everything to convince me not to join the military, but it was my way out. I was looking for a way to escape, like, this place that I grew up in, and I was so desperate to get out. Like, much like my brother. Like, my brother found an escape. Like, I was trying to get out of there so bad. And I wanted to join the military also to serve. I really was drawn to serving, and I really liked the aspect of like belonging. I wanted to belong, and I wanted to belong to like the most. I talked myself into it because I thought it was for college. Like, I was like, oh, I'm going to do this for college. And so like me and my friend joined together. We signed the papers at 17 years old. My mom had to sign them for it was an early delayed entry program. And it basically, they do this to kind of lock you in, but also, which you can always get out. Spoiler alert. They like trying to like lock you in that way to some degree, and like it also helps you secure like typically a job that you would want, because it gives them like a year to basically look for a space for you to get the job you want. And so like I signed up early, but my dumb ass basically signed an infantry like contract because that's what I wanted to do. And I say dumb ass just because it's kind of funny to poke fun at myself, Because it's like, dude, you could have done anything and you chose to do that, and people were trying to talk you out of it. But I just thought it was so funny. I wanted to belong so bad, and so of course I joined the Marines. Like, I joined like the branch that I thought was like the ultimate small branch, but also like the most, it's going to give me the best training, like the best chance at brotherhood, because that was like a big thing for them. It was like they're like a brotherhood, there's really small branch, and they're the smallest branch in the military, and they do get very, very good training, and they're held to a very high standard. I love that high standard, because like I felt like that's how you belong, is if you can achieve highly in something that like people would recognize you. And so I was looking for recognition externally as well. Like, if people saw me as a Marine, they'd be like, oh, damn, look at that guy. Like, he's a Marine. Like, that's crazy. And of course, that doesn't actually happen in real life. I mean, it kind of does, but not really, not like you think it would. And so I joined the military, and I have to do my training in California, and then I do my training in, all my basic and infantry schools and all that stuff's in there. Well, unfortunately for me, all those feelings I did Squish Cat on and tried to get rid of started to come back when I went to Chesapeake Bay, Virginia, which is dark and dreary in the wintertime. And my wife wasn't around. I had no communication. Like, when you're in training, you don't get cell phones. Like in the Marine Corps, there is no like external communication with people. And so like my wife,
the high school sweetheart became the wife.
Yes.
Yeah,
so
really quick, I guess.
Oh yeah. Oops. Yeah, I should probably clarify. Like, she was still in high school when I got engaged to her, and we got married in 2013. So she would have been, I think, a senior in high school. I think she would have been 18, or maybe she just graduated. I can't really remember. Again, fuzzy memories.
When you were in the military, you were underage. So, was there a drinking culture or not really?
Yeah. So, fun thing, the feelings came back, but I didn't drink alcohol. I was a goody two-shoes, and I always tried to obey the rules. So this is kind of the flip side to like my kind of this. I think this is just speaks to like my personality. I think personality-wise, I've always been someone that like followed the rules, because that's also like how you like obedience was like very important in my upbringing, which also was part of my personality. And so like I followed the rules. But I think there was also some religious ideology still there. Like, I grew up very like Christian, and like we didn't really know what to do with like our beliefs at the time. So like me and my wife both really, I don't think she really leaned into the religion as much as I did, but I was using it as like a crutch to like get me through. And so like a mix between my obedience and like religion and like substance, I was able to get like around not drinking. Funny enough, it wasn't until I turned 21 and I moved to my final duty station did I start drinking. This is when it was time to pay the piper, so to speak, I guess you could say, when like things started to get pretty heavy.
This is when the feelings were coming back?
Yeah, so in 2013 into 14, a great way to start a marriage is like all these feelings that I didn't deal with started coming back. And I was in a unit that protected nuclear weapons, which required you to be gone 3 weeks out of the year, 3 weeks out of the month. You were typically gone 2 weeks in there. You're not allowed to have contact with the outside world. There's no windows on any of your facilities, and like there's no cell phones allowed. And so like my wife moved up there with me after school. She gave up her aspirations and her goals and her dreams to follow me. And we're young and dumb, and we don't know how to navigate the world. Obviously, she could have continued like pursuing what she wanted up there where we were, but like she put things off to be present with me. And, we were just kind of like existing, and like we were living together and stuff. And like I lived off base, which is really unusual for an 18 to 19-year-old in the military. And so flash forward through that, I do start drinking underage a little bit. Not a lot, because I don't want to get caught, because I know what the punishment for getting caught in the military for alcohol like underage alcohol stuff was quite severe. And at the time, I thought I was going to like make a career out of this. Like I thought I was going to be a lifer for sure. And then things started to slowly degrade on my beliefs around like the military and like myself and like all these other things. Like things started getting really complicated very fast. I turned 21 while I was out there in 2014, and I was drinking every single chance I had outside of what we called the wire. So you'd be in there for 2 weeks at a time, no contact with the outside world, and then you would train for a week when you got back. So like you'd get out, you'd have to train for like a week. And like you'd have like a week of like classroom time in that month time frame typically. This is like a typical week. And so you were only home like maybe, I don't know, you weren't home very much. I'm not going to sit here and do the math. That might take too long. But anyway, I basically started drinking very heavily. And it started with my 21st birthday at Red Robin in Silverdale, Washington. And after that, it was just like the rails were off. It's so funny. I look back on it. Like I started out, like I would just drink anything I got my hands on. It was like, when I was home, I was drinking, but I was doing it in a way that like I was trying to like disguise it as like we're having fun, like let's do this thing. And my wife, you know, she had a healthy relationship with it. She could drink and like let it go. Like she would drink, like it's a social thing. Like she could just drink. She could have, you know, a couple glasses of wine or like a shot or whatever, or like some beer, and like that was the end of it. But for me, it was like, it was my excuse to like just go crazy.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Recovery Demystified. If you like what you heard, share it with a friend or rate and review us so we can reach a larger audience. Recovery Demystified is produced and edited by me, Early Brunner. Stevie Petet made our logo. Our beautiful theme music is by Logan Bragg, and our social media manager is Kaylee Bausch. We are entirely supported by your generous donations as a 501c3 nonprofit. You can find a link to donate in the description. May you be happy and free, dear listener.